Welcome to the session on branding yourself. I'm happy to see so many people here. This is amazing. Basically, my name is Valerie. You might have heard me speak at some point randomly. I am the chair of the communications working group of the MCAA, and we have 3 panelists, which I'll introduce a little bit more in detail later. But first, I kind of wanted to introduce my own working group because I'm just a major, narcissistic egomaniac. Okay, so the communication working group of the MCAA, we basically are involved in all external and internal communications. We take care of things like the blog that you might have seen. That's me, head editor, blog. You might have seen the newsletter coming around. That's Gian Maria sitting right there, who's done amazing efforts in trying to make things more accessible. We have social media. It's Ivana sitting over there, tweeting, obviously, as she should. And we also do things like supporting science communication efforts and outreach activities. So if you are interested in any of these things, feel free to reach out. I also would like to highlight some of the projects we have done recently. One is a cross-chapter outreach project that was between the French chapter, the Russian chapter, and the African chapter called Lecturers Without Borders, basically sending people that are on holiday or traveling to schools in those areas doing outreach activities, which is really interesting and really cool. We also have an educational booklet that was produced recently. I'm sorry for the people sitting in the back. You cannot see this, but there's an example. And there's some amazing effort. If you read it, it's kind of funny. It's like a discussion between the artist and the scientist trying to figure out how to explain the science in a educational but also useful way that's understandable. We also have, that was back. A art meets science project called Esperluette, which produces these little flyers, basically with amazing art that is inspired by a science project, which you can also get involved in at some point. And not to my personal favorite secretly, but that's just because I was involved. Last year we were at the Fringe Festival with a show called The Dark Side of Research, and it was very successful. We will be doing it again next year, and also maybe a sneak preview tonight. So if you are not signed up for this social event, I highly recommend you go because it will be very funny. There will also be some beer if that's what you enjoy, and Matt, who's sitting right there, will be the MC of the night, to making sure that everyone is accordingly amused. So, an incomplete introduction to branding yourself. I say incomplete introduction because this is just my personal experience of what I feel it is, and I'm hoping we can open up the discussion with other tips and tricks from all of you and obviously our panelists. I'd like to start with a little bit of a teaser question. So at some point, if you want to ask a question, please answer this first. Your personal brand is the most stupid way in which you've accidentally injured yourself. This was on Twitter recently, and as you can see, it had quite a few retweets and likes at the time that I print screened this. As an example, mine is I was 11 and I thought I can kick a football with 2 feet at the same time, but I landed on top of the ball, fell backwards, broke my arm, and had to go to confirmation the next day. The priest was very confused. Anyway, so give that a little thought. So this is not what an actual personal brand is. This is just a little icebreaker. Okay. What is branding? Let's start there. A brand is basically how a company or a person or an institution is perceived by the public. It's how it makes the public, what people associate with a certain brand. This can be something like a logo. I know the bottom one's not very clear, but that's the Nike logo. But you see a logo, you immediately know what company I'm talking about. It can be a slogan, like just do it, or open happiness, or because you're worth it. You immediately know what the brand is, and that's the power of having a brand, basically this association. I'm sure Nehama, who has actually some more academic background, might correct me on things later. There's also things like image that you want to show. So for example, Patagonia, which is an outdoors wear company, they are known for the way they treat their employees. People might want to be a green company. Finally, there is the user experience. McDonald's doesn't just want to be where you go to eat, but also you go eat there with your family. It's a whole experience. So those are things that companies do when they are branding themselves. Which brings me to science as a brand, which is a little bit of a problem because when you just look up science, you basically get a bunch of old gray people, mostly. There's like one woman here, and there's Dexter, which is very useful for all us other scientists to be compared to. And I found a very useful quote when I was preparing for this that called, "We need to change how the public thinks about science. We need to change the brand of science. And the best way to do that is actually to be the brand." So that brings us to, what is a personal brand and how can we help? In terms of personal brands, a few examples that I can think of where you immediately know when you think of a person, you associate certain feelings or a slogan or Oprah. You don't even need a last name. You know that she gives out freebies. I'm sorry, there's no freebies under your seat, but you already got a goodie bag when you came in. So other things are like Mark Manson, who pretty much wrote a book on the blog that he created, and he's known for not really caring about his language. I kind of thought of Banksy because I have a specific image what I think about when I think about Banksy. Bill Nye, you immediately think about the next part. When I say Bill Nye, you think the science guy. And a more me example, for the past 3 years, I've been at the GA, and currently people know me as the girl with the blue ukulele. So I kind of exploited on that. I know you can't see it from a distance, but my business card that I just made for this, I do not have a business or a proper profession at the moment, but is a blue ukulele. So it's just basically what people associate when they think of me. Why would you want a personal brand? Why does it even matter? From your own personal development point of view, thinking about what makes you unique, how you can sell yourself or market yourself is just really interesting in finding out what your goals are in life. But it's also very useful for your career development in terms of visibility, in terms of networking, finding your dream job. I'll give an example. I was reading online, there was a recruiter who was talking about 2 applicants for a specific job, and they were both equally qualified, but one of them had a blog about the topic, had this whole internet presence. So they went with that person because it was really clear from how they branded themselves, how their internet presence was, that they, well, were interested in what the job was. And as I said before, we kind of have to work a little bit on the brand of science and convince people that science is valuable, useful, important. And by being a scientist or a researcher with a strong brand, like I am a scientist, we can help. How do we do this personal brand thing? I honestly am not entirely sure. I'll just give the example of me. Sorry. I feel like this is a lot of plugging of myself. This is not the intention. It's just obviously the example that I'm more comfortable with. So, as I said, when people Google you, what turns up? You can try and make sure that what is on that front page of Google, no one cares about the second page, but the front page is things that you are okay with. I recently heard from the PI that is employing me that when they were looking into me and they Googled my name, and she found basically these videos, and she looked at them and she told her wife, you know what, we're going to hire this girl, she's really funny. And it has nothing to do with the job I'm doing, but the fact that she looked me up and that she's like, okay, she seems fun, let's hire her. I think she was already going to hire me, I'm not sure. But she told me this later, and I thought, well, that's kind of cool. I never realized People Google me. Social media can obviously help, making sure that those top hits on Google are the social media presence that you want the rest of the world to see. One thing I do is I try and blog. I think nerds are really cool, but that's beside the point. So let's meet the panelists who hopefully have a little bit more concrete tips of how to brand yourself. We have Martijn Peters, who is the Science Communication Officer for the Universiteit Hasselt in Belgium. And he helped set up Insight, which is the science communication platform of the university. And he is on Instagram a lot, has 1,100 followers more. A lot of followers. Oh, 11,000, wow. See, order of magnitude more. We also have Nehama Lewis, who is a senior lecturer of communication and things like the psychology of communication in Haifa in Israel. She's a board member of the MCAA, and I also want to mention that this is her 4th GA that she's attending. And we also have Matthew Murtha, who is going to be the MC for tonight, in case you were still doubting if you wanted to join or not. He is, according to his Twitter profile, a professional international man of mystery and science. He does a lot of science comedy, for example, the radio show Technically Funny. And he is technically funny, which is the best kind of funny. Okay. Anyway, I am going to turn on their mics so they can actually talk. I would like this to be a very open discussion, free-flowing. I do have a few questions prepared, but it would be a lot better if the questions come from you. But just to start, I want to ask the panelists to tell us what their personal brand is, both ironically and truthfully.
I guess I can start. So in your Twitter question, my personal brand is the stupidest way I've ever injured myself, and that was by signing up for American football when I was a freshman in high school. There I was, Friday night, first game of the season, right? The lights are on, the crowd's packed in the stands, and we're warming up, and we have, I was on the practice squad, and we had the varsity there, and number 55, Brian Vrost, comes pulling around the line of scrimmage. I lock eyes with him, and in that moment I go, ah! Got my hand slammed in between the two of us, broke my finger in 3 different places, and joined the math club on the following Monday. So, and then my professional brand though, I'm technically funny and scientifically silly. So, I see a lot of people believe that.
So I don't usually think about this, but I would say a personal or professional brand would be an easily distracted researcher, Australian, but a hybrid Middle Eastern Australian. I do mind control, basically, and I get paid for it. So it's called persuasion, but I just play around with people for fun. My brand, as far as my research, would be media and drugs. So my students know that I'm like the go-to person for anything related to research about cannabis. An accident story would be, I was 11 in a place in Australia called Berry, which like no one lived, well, people live there, but it's like a drive-through kind of place. So I was in a pool, like about shoulder high, and my dad thought it would be an excellent idea to do a diving competition from that height. So my sister and I proceeded to do a diving competition, and I lost, and I broke 3/4 of my tooth. And so that was the last time I ever took my dad's recommendation for anything.
Okay, so to start with my injury story, it happened during that magical time that we all know, high school. And me and my friends were laid about at night, and at a certain time point, the science nature lover I am, I thought it would be cool to be one with nature for a moment. I jumped into a bush, and I broke my arm in the progress, so that's kind of a stupid injury. Professional brand, I am someone who is a lot on social media, I guess, especially Twitter and Instagram. So I'm all about bringing science through social media and the power that is behind there. And on the side, I also get paid as a science communication officer for a university to do exactly the same thing. So that's nice, I guess.
Thank you. Are there any questions already from the audience? Just wait for the mic for 1 second.
It will be like half an hour explaining the injury stories.
Yes, when it comes to branding yourself online, for instance, sometimes it is a bit problematic because, for instance, there are many social networks now, and if you share your ideas in any view, it might bring you negative results. So I think brand management is something you should be very careful about. That's why, for instance, I refrain from using Facebook because I think everybody follows it, and some companies even choose you based on their personal values on Facebook somehow. So what should we do for social networking?
Yeah.
Don't do it.
Yeah, I think maybe as someone who is on social media, I would say just do it anyway. But I think what is important here is the difference, and this is also what I teach to all my students in my classes about science communication on social media, is the fact that you have to keep yourself as a professional brand and as a person separate. So if you would look at my profiles, you will hardly ever see personal stuff of me on my Instagram or my Twitter space, as to say so, because I think it can be difficult to mix the two up. So I have separate social media for me as a person, and I have the ones that I use as a brand, which are purely used for science communications. For example, you will not see me talking bad about a referee in a soccer game when my favorite soccer team lost or anything on Twitter like someone else might do. So I really keep them separate to avoid these kind of issues.
I would also recommend, I don't think you should shy away from controversies and conflicts on social media. What you have to keep in mind is not to get too emotionally invested. Like when you start writing in all caps and calling somebody a bad word, that's when you look bad. But you can engage people. In fact, I would highly recommend it, because it's when you have a big debate or a big discussion, that's when people start to notice, and you'll gain more followers, and your brand will become more valuable in that respect. But you just always have to like take yourself out of the social media, pretend you're at a conference and having a conversation, just stay cool and and remind them what's going on. Be like, look, we're both way too invested in whether or not DNA confirmation comes from nucleosomes right now. I don't actually think you're an asshole, right? Like, de-escalate and just try to keep it academic, I would say.
I was just going to say, I think that branding is something that people have an innate ability to smell when you're branding something that you're not really. So you see people try and jump on like fashionable brand bandwagons, like McDonald's tries to brand itself as a healthy alternative, but I mean, we all know that it's not really. So I think as researchers, I see this sometimes, people, for example, in science communication, I mean, it's a hot area, so people who have done no research in science communication, like, tweet themselves as if they were, and I think you can play that game once or twice, but if you can't back it up with actual content, eventually people see through the trick. So for me, it's really important, like if somebody says they do something and they tag themselves or they represent that as their brand, I kind of ask a few questions just to see if they can back that up.
I think that's completely wrong.
As you can see, Matt is very professional. So, are there any other questions? One there.
Sorry.
We can do this if you want.
We're off.
Sorry. I guess we can have this conversation publicly. But to her comments, I think it's wrong, or at least not true to my experience. What happens, I see online, is people, they build their identity first and then they make it true. Like you have people that say they're an expert in something and at first they're just bullshitting you. And I don't know if I can say that at a conference, but like
Or being live streamed. So
I don't think there are any politicians in here, maybe, or.
but you know, and there's it's sadly American, but fake it until you make it, right? So I disagree that people can smell a phony.
Okay, so I would agree with you to an extent. I think that you can bluff your way into like invitations for talks and like various, you know, professional, like exactly, various professional contexts. But can you imagine if you brand yourself as some kind of scientist and then you get the job, you actually have to do the job. So at some point, you know, the branding takes you there, but you have to have some kind of substance. And another expert who actually knows the area will ask you a question from the audience. They'll say, you know, what's that based on? So you can bluff it, but I wouldn't want to be caught branding myself as something and then be called out like, okay, you say you're, like the meme, you say you're talking about this, but you don't really know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I think it's mostly short-term gains if you look at it, because as you will probably gain, for example, of social media, you will gain the following, you will gain the expertise, but in the long haul, you will completely destroy your own personality, because there's no way that you can keep up that appearance. I mean, at the end, it will eat you away on the inside.
You guys don't watch much reality TV.
Okay, Khaled, yes.
Yeah. Thank you for the presentations. I noticed that Matt and Valerie, at least, you guys have a different approach to branding. Like both of you have like almost alternative identity online or alternative career. Do you recommend that many people do that, or do you recommend another way to brand yourself?
I don't recommend following anything I do. Like I've moved into science comedy simply because I'm a deeply unserious person, and I was finding a hard time maintaining the facade in the scientific community of, you know, pretending to always be serious. If you follow me on Twitter, MJMurtha3. If you follow me or anything, I have personal stuff there. I call out my mother for being a Trump supporter. I don't know, whatever else terrible you can put online. But I wouldn't recommend that for all of you well-adjusted looking people necessarily. You could follow her and Martin's plan.
Actually, I have a really, as silly as this sounds, I really dislike social media.
Yeah.
So I kind of teach the psychology of branding, but I take the kind of snobby point of view that if you're good enough at what you do, you don't need to work that hard to sell it. I may be wrong, but maybe it's just a personality thing. But I do appreciate that people use it and they use it well. I guess I'm just old school.
So in my case, you said that maybe my online presence isn't exactly what I am. It's kind of what I want to be. So I'm not currently a professional science communicator, but I did write that on my card.
Bullshit.
Yeah, so fake it till you make it. Also because if I tell people, please write for our blog, and I don't have a card, it's really annoying. But it's what I would like to be. So in that sense, I guess fake it till you make it does work.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
No, this is for the audience, so I'm just kind of curious, how many people are here because you're interested in branding your laboratory, and just out of anybody, or are you just here because this is the least boring of the sessions? A few of you. Pro tip, by the way, this apropos of that, there's only 2 of you raised your hand, so this is just for you. I read that publications and media won't approach you for an opinion or your expertise until you have at least 1,000 Twitter followers. So that's useful for 2 of you.
Okay,
You're
we
welcome.
had a question over there.
Not the crowd I thought it was.
We have technical problems.
I can fill the time.
Yeah.
Okay, no, I have my voice. No, in general, I think most of us are here PhD students or postdocs or like somehow researchers. And what would I mean, you all have doctors in, I don't know in which field, but what would be the 5 first steps to go and build up a media presence or your brand? Or 3 steps, I don't know.
Three steps. Let's see. I would say figure out who you are, then figure out who you want to reach, and then figure out how you want to do it. So those are like the 3 important steps that I can directly get off the top of my head. So first figure out who you want to brand yourself as. I think that's nice what was said before, like I want to brand myself as a person I would like to become, because that shows a clear future vision of yourself, something you can work toward. And then figure out who you want to reach, which actually matters for choosing, for example, your digital platform. I would say if you are more like into networking with other researchers, policymakers, journalists, pick something like Twitter. Do you really want to go more into a visual aspect with science communication and reach a more younger audience? Go to Instagram. And then figure out how you want to do it. So the way in which you want to brand yourself. Do you want to do it through comedy? Do you want to do it through pictures, videos, teaching, etc., etc., opinion maker, stuff like that. So I think if you go to these 3 steps, you will already be a whole longer way. And read a bit about science communication on social media. That might help as well.
I'm going to let these guys handle the social media aspects of it. But from a psych point of view, the default is that people tend by default not to pay close attention. So if you're at a conference with like 6,000 people and you're introduced to somebody who could be potentially very useful, so they might remember maybe 4 things about you. So if you think ahead of time, 4 things that you want them to remember, like a word or a phrase or something that you've been researching, that if they then Google you, they will find you anyway. So if, for example, if you've got a PhD in a certain area and you had to tag it, or if you were looking for it on Google, how would you find it? Like, what 4 words? So for example, and I'm not saying any of you to read my research, but if you look up cannabis, media, information seeking, and communication or persuasion, those are like 5 words that will find me. So where this is useful is if there's an event and then people use those 4 words, they'll find you and then they'll invite you to that event, or they'll put you on a panel or something. So for me, Google, I think, is a good tool to know, am I appearing where I should be appearing? Like if I was a journal editor and I wanted a reviewer for a specific topic, would they find me? Because if they're not finding me, then I'm deluding myself, basically, that that's my brand.
Yeah. I think that's a great tip also, which you just gave, because you can use these same keywords to manage your bios on social media, because in the end, those are also search engine and people will find you on the social media through those same keywords.
I agree.
Are there any other questions? There's someone in the back. And many questions. Sorry. So in the back first, and then we'll move forward.
Let them fight.
Yes, we'll put the microphone in the middle, and you have to run and grab it and fight with each other. No, hi.
Hi. So I was just wondering, in today's generation, everyone talks about social media, but what happens to the traditional forms of science communication? That's like articles, or be it ResearchGate or things like this. How is it valued?
ResearchGate was invented in like 2008. I don't know if that counts as traditional. But I don't. The publications aren't going to, and they're just going to go online.
So basically, I think it's are the more traditional science communication things, like maybe paper print or talking with journalists, or not really publications, because that's dissemination, let's say that, but are they still relevant today in times of social media?
I don't know. I think you can't not be on social media. So you need to have some kind of blogging and posting going on. Like my mom doesn't even read my articles. No one reads my articles. And nobody reads your articles, sorry, unless they need to. So you read what you have to read because everybody's busy. Now my stuff is actually very interesting, but nobody reads it. So I think you can send your articles to people, but that's asking them to invest a lot of time. So they need to be motivated to do that. So social media makes it a lot easier.
We actually had a question. Oh.
Hi, I have a question. Do you think that actually the use of social media is diverse across cultures? And I'm asking this because I moved from Europe to North America, and I realized that, for example, the researchers are really encouraged to use LinkedIn more than anything else. And I don't know if this is only my view, or is it really something into it that branding depends on your region, really, and how you approach it.
Is the question is which cultures use which social media? Yeah, in my experience, Europeans are very hesitant to use Facebook, and they always have like different names or whatever. And it's also very much like Martin was saying. It's very much by field too. So I don't know. Economists use Twitter, and SciComm uses Instagram. No?
Yeah, being a modest Belgian, I think I could not agree more with the statement that culture can affect social media presence. If I see just the basic of scientists, I was one of the first ones who actually started to leverage social media for science communication. Before that, yeah, we had like the celebrity, Lieve Scheire, great guy, also does English shows about science and comedy and stuff like that. But he was already a celebrity long before the dawn of social media, so he had a following. But except for that, there were maybe some professors with like 200, 300 followers. While I saw that a lot of my colleagues in North America that I knew, there were massive amount of scientists on there. And then I started, and I worked my way up, and now a lot more people in Belgium are starting to doing it, because you set an example. So that's actually something nice. If your culture is still a bit on the back end of social media, you could be a pioneer and leverage that. So,
if you want to, though, you have to remember social media is just a tool, and I'm hesitant to encourage anybody to use it unless you really want to, get the word out and like be seen as a voice or something. But it's a ton of self-promotion, and it eats away at your soul a little bit. So just be careful. And if you don't have to, then don't do it. I mean, it's interesting about the traditional forms of science dissemination and communication, because they're still valid. Like, I know that nobody reads her papers, but if you're doing interesting stuff, people in your field will read them and engage.
Well, the right people read them, actually.
Yeah. Well, don't do cannabis research. No.
Okay. Yes.
Okay. I was pushed by my supervisor to open a Twitter account, and he told me you will find there loads of information about conferences and everything. And I really approached to it as a newspaper. You open, you read. But then, and I started following all kind of researchers, like those that I read. And I discovered that some of them have such a terrible Twitter personality. I mean, so annoying. I can't stand it. And first of all, it changed the way I perceive their research. And I also understand it means it is so subjective that whatever I do there, someone will take it this way or this way. So I'm so hesitant, and I feel so uncomfortable in this position, because on the one hand, I try not to do anything because everything can ruin, but then it's like a peep show. So I really don't know what to do with this. Please help.
Never tweet. No, but you have to, I mean, that's just a general warning for anybody engaging in social media. That stuff is designed algorithmically to elicit emotional reactions. That's why my entire Facebook feed is just pictures of babies and like rightist political things.
Right?
No, babies, they piss me off.
There's a filter for that.
They make me upset, sorry.
He's so upset he lost track of what he was saying.
Yeah, but I mean, you you just have to remember that stuff is mediated. It's being put in front of you for a reason, and it's not just because you follow them. A lot of that is kind of the people with the loudest voices tend to rise to the top, and the people with the loudest voices are not the most rational, you know?
But
So
sometimes
just remove yourself emotionally from it again and again. For Twitter and that kind of thing, maybe it is kind of depending on why your advisor wants you to be on Twitter. Because it's true, you can build networks, you can meet people you would never. For this Science Slam show tonight, I follow a couple of people, and somebody was like, oh, I got a new apartment in Vienna, and she's a science communicator. I was like, I'm going to be performing in Vienna. She told, I don't know, maybe a dozen of her friends, and they're all coming out tonight. And so we're going to meet in the real world, and she seems like a lovely person. So like it can be beneficial, but you just have to remember that it's not exactly real, and it's made and designed to get you addicted to it.
Just to give you another example, I did a rotating curating thing a while ago called I Am SciComm, which is actually how I got connected to you. You probably don't know. But Martijn was like interacting a lot with that account, and that's how I thought of him for this panel. So basically that was kind of the power of Twitter. I don't know. Anyway.
Yeah.
So there was a question there.
Hi, thanks for the interesting discussion that you started. And actually, I noticed a little bit of a conflict in the message that you were saying, because you were saying you need to show what you want to be, but you don't have to fake it. And this is a little bit, how do you manage that? So I understand it's not trivial to communicate on social medias because you have to disseminate, so you have to lower a little bit also the level of the readers that you expect. So in your mind before you write, otherwise nobody will understand. You better write articles directly. But the fact that you may want to show on some social platform someone that you are not really yet conflicts with the fact that you cannot fake what you really are at that moment. So.
I don't actually think that's what the, if I may.
Yeah, so I wanted just to have a
I think what the general conclusion for me at least was, you can fake it if you want to get somewhere, but you don't have to do it it's not obliged to fake your way into social media famedom, as to say. I think Matt was pointing out that there are a lot of people who do it, but they're not naturally the example I would put forward as to how to be on social media. And there's also a difference, I think, between being fake as to get more following and having a future vision of where I want to be somewhere. That's not really faking, because it's in, how do I have to say, you want to become that person, and that person is still inherently you. So for example, when I was doing social media communication of my PhD, in my head had the feeling I want to become, or at least I want to become a professional in science communication. So that was the picture I had mentally for me where I wanted to go. And that's what drove me on social media to produce content and stuff like that. But that was never faking my personality, which is a possibility to do, but I wouldn't advise you to fake it.
Yeah, and also if you're in this room, you're not really having to fake anything. You are a scientist. You know more than the vast majority of it's my magnetic personality. You already know more than the vast majority of humanity, right? So like you can have some confidence in that, and you can be upfront with like where you're headed. You're going to become a science communicator, or you're going to become an expert in this field, and you can be conversational and open and honest about it, and not have to destroy your insides or whatever it is that you're actually worried about.
Okay, we have a question over there.
Hello, guys. I'm Hari, I'm from Spain, but I'm currently working in Belgium, in KU Leuven. as a researcher. Sorry, the competence. And but I don't want to continue in research, and I want to switch to science communication. That's why I'm here. But I wonder how to do it. I need your help, guys. No, but you said that you start doing your PhD, Martijn, doing blogging, or because I find it's pretty difficult to find a way to tackle a new field for you, especially when you don't have a background. Yeah, I don't know what is the most important thing to take into account when switching.
I think everyone's journey into science communication is a bit personal. So I can tell you about how I got there, but that might not necessarily be the way that you are going to get there. One pro tip that I might give you to start is search for something that you're good at and that you like. For me, for example, that was presenting. I always liked to present about my science research, whether it was presentation in class. So the first thing I actually did was a science slam, so science comedy. And I enjoyed it so much that I started following workshops. So in Belgium, normally at KU Leuven there will be 2 doctoral schools, so workshops that you can follow as a PhD student. So I started following all these workshops which had to do with science communication. I think I had like 5 to 10 workshops on presentation, and most of them were the same, but some tips in each workshop were unique. And that's how I got into presentation. And then afterwards, for me personally, I had the feeling like, okay, I am really depending on other people to present my research. I have to wait until somewhere a show is organized or a competition. I have to wait until a journalist might approach me. And then I discovered social media, first Twitter and then Instagram. And it really went quite slow for me. If you would track back my social media history, I started with Twitter and I think I had like 1.5 years, 500 followers. So really slowly, only niche, so researchers in my field, some big science communication account like I Am SciComm and stuff like that. And then I said at a certain moment, I'm going to tweet every single day. Because if you look a bit into, you can, for example, you look on YouTube, but most of those might be crap in social media marketing. But some strategies, for example, if you look at people like Gary Vee, who is a social media marketeer and does a lot of presentations on there, they might have some valid tips. For example, I knew for Twitter, if you tweet every day, the algorithm will be a bit better for you. People will see you more. Same goes for Instagram and stuff like that, although that algorithm changed every day since Facebook owns it. And since I started doing that, and most importantly, it's the engagement stuff in social media. Engage with other people. So most people, I know professors, they just tweet every day a tweet and they never engage, and they have, after 3 years, still 50 followers because they never put time into other people. Like social media is also an engagement, an effort that you make. You have to put time into other people. So that's one of the most important things. If you engage, then you can benefit from that. But again, it's really personal. For example, if you like drawing, you can start making science comics or start drawing people like on Twitter you have the Amoeba sisters. They draw beautiful sketches and make comics about cells and how they interact with each other. So that's an example. You like video, start vlogging. You can do whatever you want and then focus on it, pinpoint down. For me, it was video and more graphic, which really boosted my Instagram. I started Instagram last year, December, and in under a year I went over 10,000 followers because I found what I really liked, and that was taking pictures, editing them, creating a story around the picture, and especially making videos, for which I use the skills I learned when started to vlog myself, so how to edit videos and stuff like that. So I hope that helps you a little bit.
I want to be a little bit of a downer here. I think it's really important, and that there is definitely value to getting your brand out in social media. But for anyone here who's on the academic track, and for example, tenure track or something, or considering that, I think it's also important to keep in mind what criteria you're going to be evaluated on. So having been through the tenure track routine, the people who look at your CV at the end of the day and decide whether or not to promote you, I don't think Instagram, if anything, social media might actually hurt you if you have people who are, say, I don't mean to stereotype here, but let's say they're over 50, they're not going to value the amount of Twitter followers you have like somebody who's of a different demographic. And also, if time is a zero-sum game in academia, you need to really be looking at the criteria that's going to get you promoted, and that is old school. That's usually publications, evaluation. However, if you're not in academia, then it's different. I completely agree. I think if you're being evaluated on how much do people know you, then spend your time on Twitter, because that will help.
I think I agree and I disagree with them. So in Belgium, I'm a bit known for going into discussion on Twitter with these kind of things, because I am someone who says like academics should be credited for science communication as well. It's as much of an academic credit as someone who is good in teaching or someone who's good in the lab, because we need science communicators as well. That being said, I think social media can really boost your academic career. If I can just put one example, it's my wife, who I started coaching in social media. So I started saying to her, you might benefit from Twitter. I would say for academic track record, don't do Instagram, just go for Twitter. Instagram is indeed really science communication. They won't hardly evaluate it. But she started working on Twitter, and I coached her a bit, and I said, okay, put out every day a tweet about your research. People started getting to know her. She was, instead of her promoter, invited to the first WHO conference on air pollution. She has been nominated 2 weeks ago as one of the Forbes 30 under 30, and that is all based on her social media presence. So she does amazing work in the lab. She's an incredible scientist, way better than I would ever be, but because she boosted her research through social media, she gained opportunities that she otherwise wouldn't have that benefit her academic career. So not the Twitter on its own benefits it, but everything she got out of the social media and the network. She won a lot of prizes in Belgium, Netherlands, now on European level, and that is how it can boost you as an academic researcher. So I would never advise anyone in my workshops to start, for example, Instagram if they're purely focused on, I want to become, for example, a professor. So on that, I agree completely. Don't go overboard on science communication because they won't, or at least now they won't credit you for that. Yeah.
Okay, we have a question over there. I know you're surprised, but hi.
My question in short is just how effective is science communication on Twitter or social media at the moment? Because the purpose of, from what I understand, science communication is to the public, and probably most of our followers are the scientists that are already in our field, reading the same papers that we're reading. So how effective is it, no matter how many followers you have? Is it really...
You're talking to 3 science communicators. We're going to say, oh, it's very effective. We're biased.
But in social media, are we really reaching the public that are outside scientific field?
Are we just talking into an echo chamber, I guess?
Oh, yes. Somebody had a question for that. Yeah, that's a very good question. I was biased. I was going to say, by telling people I'm a science comedian, I have gotten people that are not interested in science, interested in particular studies and everything, but that's a very personal, that's in the real world and telling jokes at airports and, you know, just being friendly. For Twitter and all that, I don't know how much correct information is spread. Maybe Martin's better.
Yeah, there is data on that. So for example, I think it was last year there was a study about social media, SciComm on Twitter, and they said like, where is this whistle coming from? There was a study and they showed like, okay, if you're under 1,000 followers on Twitter, they're mostly scientists from your field, so it's an echo chamber. That being said, I think one important thing that we often tend to miss with science communication is that communicating to your peers, to other researchers, is also science communication. I have been to a lot of conferences in my own field, and I was really sitting there at keynotes and I was thinking like, what the hell are they talking about? And I studied like 9 years for this. So it's crazy. So I think do not undervalue science communication to peers. That being said, you have to have a certain size to communicate outside of your bubble. And then you also have, of course, the disadvantage that we tend to follow people who we like. So we have our own confirmation bubble. That's confirmation bias on social media. So you only hear what you like on social media because people who will follow you will probably agree with your vision on the world. So that's another problem. I think though Instagram, from personal experience, has a way broader reach than, for example, Twitter. If I look at my viewers on Twitter, they're between 18 and 40 years old. Most category goes like late teens, early 20s. Not necessarily all scientists. I would think half of them might be scientists. The other half are not scientists. So I really have young people reaching out to me like, oh, I might want to become a scientist now. So I think Instagram, for example, is a great way to reach a broader audience, more so than Twitter.
Yeah, now that I'm thinking about it, I think the way to think of the question is which platform do you yourself learn from? So it's very platform specific. You use Twitter to contact and connect with other scientists and researchers and maybe learn from it. But like generally you yourself probably don't learn that much from Twitter. But YouTube, man, YouTube explanation videos, that's how I know world history. It's also how you can tell I'm American. But I think that, visual base, that's where the learning is happening.
There was also, a few years ago, an article about Facebook and how to be a nerd of trust on Facebook, because a lot of people still use Facebook for like more personal things, and that we should be okay with just communicating to the people you know, like your friends, your family, and that is very undervalued. Maybe you can make a small difference there. I don't know. I have cousins that are very young. I can get them interested in science. So that might be another way to look at it.
So maybe it would be rather a comment than a question. We were trying a few years ago to establish a Facebook page for our project. What did I find actually is that the majority of scientists, at least around me, weren't just using any social media. They saw it as a terrible burden. They were supposed to write once in half a year a post for this Facebook page, and they found it extremely difficult. I have to read all these posts through. They were still written very scientifically, and after me, our science project manager read them, and still it was too difficult. So I got kind of very disappointed in this because I didn't see any point. Also, we had difficulties to reach target group. We are working on neurodegeneration. It's mostly elderly people who are not using Facebook. And I kind of just trying to find out if there are benefits and how can I get it. And in turn, wouldn't it somehow harm scientific part of my career? Because now I know how much time does it take from scientists to write science communication text. And if I would see a person active on this, I would rather think if I want to recruit him or her, that part of his or her working time will probably be allocated to this communication, and it might not be something that I would like to have in the lab.
Yeah, so I think I detected a couple questions in there, right? I'm just going to pretend like that's a flattering noise every time. All right, so yeah, outreach to the older population, hang out at bingo halls, I don't know. To the point that, and I think that's an interesting topic though, to the point that like, there's people out there, and at the time I was one of them, where you just want to do science, right? It's a lot of BS that's floating around. And it's great for the people that can do the self-promotion and all the daily tweets and everything. But to me, it seems unfair to expect that out of people. And I don't know exactly how, as participants in the fields and as researchers and one day policymakers or people that inform, I don't know how we change change it to protect people and allow them to just do science. I imagine in all things that funding is the answer, but maybe you guys have an idea?
You have to do it. I evaluate grants, and there's a huge section on social media, and I take points off for people who don't have a plan for that. So there's some cognitive dissonance here, but you need to do it. Maybe in your lab you can find somebody who can help you and is like naturally more into the self-promotion thing, and then, I don't know.
The youngest person.
Exactly, but you can't escape it. It's a necessary evil. I think so.
Okay, we had a question over there.
Does that answer any of it?
Thanks. Was kind of a follow-up to that comment about this effectiveness of science communication to the public, right? And I was just, because I felt like there is a difference between branding yourself and what you mentioned before, branding science. Because I think in the public opinion, scientist or science is just kind of a lot of different interpretations. And as a community, if I can use the word, what's your take on, branding science? Because ultimately, if you go out, you say, I'm a researcher, and you're kind of put into a box, you're a group. And also a second question is, you guys kind of touched upon it a bit, but could you please elaborate a little bit more on the offline forms of science communication you're saying? Yeah, basically that's my question. Thank you.
So the first question was, instead of a personal brand, how about science as a brand? And some comments on that.
I have, I don't know, because I'm personally conflicted on that, right? I personally don't like the image that scientists have in the public eye. And so I myself am trying to get people to realize that, hey, we can be funny, silly people too. But I think maybe I go a little too far into that, and nobody's going to trust us if we all look like this. So I guess a poll would be the best way to answer that question. But
sorry, I just need to say that. You think that being silly is what stops people from trusting you? I kind of have the opposite feeling, that we're kind of creating an image that's very distant from the public.
I do think though that social media and allowing a little bit of your own personality to shine through on whatever your branded scientist page or handle is going to be helpful. And I think that as we move forward in a more online society, people will realize that people are no longer the image that we had. So I remember growing up, and you're like, that's a fireman, that's a policeman, that's a scientist, right? And you don't know anything about their internal personal life. And now as we are more online and, and it's also like a social justice, as we recognize that these stereotypes are only stereotypes. They're just easily, easy ways to see a person, but we know that they're not true. And we know that everybody is actually conflicted and has self-doubts and insecurities. So I think it's gonna fix itself along the way. I don't think that there are big differences between scientists and the rest of the population, though I would like to think we're smarter.
Yeah, I guess the second part of the question was about offline science communication, if anyone has any thoughts.
Carrier pigeons. Gonna be huge.
We have a question in the front here. We will have a question from the front here. There's another microphone. Yeah.
You can shout it, I'll repeat it.
So it was about the elderly not being part of social media. I mean, they have families, right? So we can reach those people. And I mean, everyone is worried about their family member. So if not reaching exactly the population we are trying to reach, maybe we can reach somebody else.
Yeah, I apologize. That bingo hall thing was not real advice. That was, and I think the elderly or at least in my family, they're on Facebook and they're stating their opinions strongly.
a little bit too strongly sometimes.
Well, I think there are also a lot of nice events offline for elder people. For example, at our university, we have the senior university, which is like talks that are given, I think once or twice, sometimes even per week, where senior people can come visit. And they learn about certain topics in science from our university. For example, last week there was a talk on solar energy and how we at Hasselt University are trying to progress the field of solar cells. So those are, for example, nice things. We do the same, but that is a mix between elder people and people with MS, called the MS Days, where patients actually are brought by the university to the university, and where all MS researchers are explaining their research to these people and showing people around in the lab what are they doing to combat, for example, multiple sclerosis. So I think there are really nice ways to reach these people without social media.
That's excellent advice. Community organizing, has not been mentioned at all, and that's a very powerful way to actually elicit real change. So that was.
Okay. Do you have any? There's a question over here.
I have actually also two questions. It was mentioned that social media plays a big part in grants. Could you comment on that? And also, for you, Valerie, or probably for everybody, but you mentioned that your first Google site should look good. And could you tell us a bit about how to do that? Because nobody really knows the algorithms behind it and how to make the best effort to have your first Google site looking good. Thank you.
I'll quickly deal with the first question. So I evaluated ITN projects for a few years now, and there's a section on outreach, and you can tell who wrote the project, whether or not the person actually uses social media, because they'll write something super vague like, we're going to talk to the public on Facebook like once a year. And it's like, no, that's not going to work. Because then you have really detailed, serious plans from people who know what they're doing. And they describe like blogging and podcasts and YouTube and everything. And unfortunately, the science can be excellent, but as an evaluator, you're not going to get funded, because the difference is so tiny in the total score, and literally not having a social media plan could be the difference. So that's why I call it a necessary evil. And ironically, it doesn't even matter if you actually do it. But I don't know what happens. I don't see the actual results, but you need to have a plan for it. Yep.
How do you feel about that ethically?
It's not my problem.
Are we incentivizing? Well, but you're participating, and you could. Are we incentivizing the wrong set of skills for our researchers?
No, I think we established that science communication is very important and people on social media. So I think it's a good thing. And I think, again, authenticity, if it's written in a way that shows that the person knows what they're doing, then I give them credit points literally for that as well.
Okay. On the Google thing, to be honest, there's only so much control you have on it. But for example, if there's something on Google that you're like, I do not want that to come up in a search, I can give you an example. When I was just starting out at uni and I was studying engineering, a journalist student interviewed me about women in engineering. And I think we were joking around, and I ended up saying something along the lines of, I want to be an engineer so I can be really rich and have a mansion and a lot of manservants. Which is not true, and I'm pretty sure the interviewer said that and I didn't, but anyway, it was in this article, and if you Googled my name, there was me quoted to be saying, oh, I just want some manservants. So I ended up contacting the website. Well, actually my mom found it and said, do you really want this to be online? So you can also contact people and say, I don't want this to be online, and they took it off. So that's a way to do it. And I guess if you blog or using, I guess the keywords that Nehama was mentioning earlier, I don't know, using the buzzword of the time, making sure that's somewhere in, if you have a blog, trying to make all your friends click on your links so that it gets more hits, and then maybe that's how Google does its algorithm. I'm not sure about how Google does its algorithm, but there's some control you can have on what comes up on the first page, and especially what you don't want to be on the first page. Okay, there was a question over there.
Thank you for the funny talk, or I had fun at least. Yeah, about me, I once broke my own nose with my own knee during high jump, but the problem here, and that's my question, I got a name, my parents were very gracious, that is basically one of the most common names in the German realm. My family name is very common and my surname is very common. And to get back to the people should just Google you so they find you problem, is there any possibility or are there any tricks to get my name to appear on the first page? Because I have some pretty famous namesakes, so when you Google me, you find them.
I think she wants to answer a part of the question.
Google likes a lot if you have a website that have links to another websites. So as much as you get contact with others, you will go up. If I Google myself, I come up not with my normal website, but a site where I'm in network with another people, and we have a lot of links to other links to instruments, to organizations, to I don't know everything, and this site come up first than my own. And my name is strange.
I guess in terms for like your name, maybe using a middle initial would help, or that's the only thing I can think of. I have a quite unusual name, so I do not have that problem, sorry.
You could also use a brand name. So for example, for me on Instagram, that would be Stories of a Scientist, because Martijn Peters is, I have the same problem as you. I have the most common name in surname in Belgium and the Netherlands, and my first name is not helping either. So there are like tons of Martijn Petersen. So the guy with the original handle, he's like a guy posing next to a fancy car like this with a hat on. So
that was you.
Yeah, no, that's not me.
I see your Instagram.
But if you, for example, use a brand name, people will find you through that brand name in the ranking also, for example, and get a lot of followers. That helps as well.
Deepak has a question.
That was really funny, guys. Thank you. Just a really quick question. Do you guys think you have to gather enough content before coming online and keep it rolling? I think it would be morely relevant to Martijn. Do you think you wait for enough content so that you keep it rolling, your profile, or you go through your time, make yourself more empowered, and then jump into it, you know? You understand my question? No?
No, I didn't quite catch that.
Okay.
Do you just dive in, or?
No, the question is, yeah, I'm sorry. Okay.
Slow down.
Yeah, that's right.
The question is, do you wait so that you gather enough content before going online? So that you keep it rolling all the time? Or you just jump in? Because I think if you're spending time on this, then it better be effective, else there's no point just spending time here and there. But I mean, if you want to be effective, I think you have to have enough content so you keep it rolling, you know, so you keep the followers there, else they would be bored. And do you see yourself, do you see yourself pushing too much sometimes, all of you guys, pushing yourself too much to still be in the zone? Because I think unless you are pretty popular, your business is in a way going down. So do you see yourself pushing too much sometimes? That was a long question.
Well, yeah, I'll answer
Thanks.
I'll tell you right off the bat, I think that he's the only one that can answer this, right? Because he's actually got a lot of followers, and I'm just a silly. But I think that you should just start creating content, and it kind of answers her question too. She was asking, how do you become a science communicator? Like, what is the practical way? And in a long-about way, the thing that Martin was saying is let your passion guide you, right? So if you have a passion for this stuff, man, just start writing, start making it, or videoing it, or whatever it is, and start building it, and let that really move you. In my personal experience, you know, I start doing these jokes, and I have Technically Funny, and I actually have to rebrand myself in a little bit because it turns out some engineer in California does engineering jokes under the name Technically Funny. So I'll change that. You're allowed to change down the line, and you can grow like an insect and, you know, molt at some point, I think. Don't wait for the quality to be good, because it's only going to become good after a very long time.
Exactly. You create good quality, like eventually the quality is going to be good. Martijn said something earlier about tweeting every day. I try in my blog to write a blog post every week. I don't have a lot of readers. They're mostly just like my mom. Yay, mom. Anyway, but for me, it helps me kind of hone in what I find interesting. And at some point, I'll probably change to more an actual domain name and have a more professional blog. But while I'm still figuring out what I want to do, having the goal of doing this weekly is helping me get better at writing. And especially after I wrote my PhD thesis, I was so sick of writing. And I'm like, what happened to me? I really liked writing things. And that helped me. I know that not all of it is great, but some of it might be. And this is how you get better qualities, just by practicing. So.
Yeah, I completely agree again. I think content is king on social media, but what differs, for example, just to take me as an example from other people, was the fact that I just did it. People often keep it in the back of their head, I want to start doing science communication, but how am I going to do it? How am I going to, for example, on Instagram, design this picture? Do I have to have a certain layout? Just tell the stories. People want the content, people want you. Never forget, people follow people on social media. As someone who manages an institute brand name inside for a university, I know how difficult it is to grow as a brand. I know how easy it is to grow as a person. So just start producing content, and like my colleagues here said, you will get better at the quality of the content anyway. Just go back and look at my first pictures on Instagram and look at the team I have now. That is something that developed throughout the years. By doing something, you will already be ahead of most people, because most people never get out of the planning phase. You just have to start doing it and then push it. It's hard work, science communication. I'm not going to wrap it in a nice gift bag and say everyone should do it, it's really easy. No, it's really hard work. And once you grow big, like now I have a couple of thousands of followers, I can lay it to the back a bit and I can say I put out maybe a post once a week, maybe 2 or 3 times a week this week, but I try to do regular videos on Instagram to keep the algorithm happy, like this account is happy, this account is active, so just start producing content, man.
Yeah, understood. Just that, do you think if you were still a researcher, do you think you could have still spent the same amount of time maintaining the same amount of followers?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I started doing science communication when I was a researcher. I've only been a science communication officer for 1 year. Okay. So 1 year ago, I was finishing up my PhD while making videos on Instagram. So you can go back to my Instagram profile, and there's a whole video about my day on the day that I did my PhD Viva the Events. So you can follow the whole day on that video. So I just produce content every day. Okay. I used to vlog while I was doing my PhD, so I was working from, no PhD student works from 9 to 5, but I was working through the day, and then when I came home, I started to learn how to edit videos, which I made with like a crappy camera and a tripod in the lab. So yeah, you certainly can do it, but think about this. Do you want to become a science communicator professionally, or do you want to boost your research? Because what I wanted to do was become a professional in science communication. So don't go do what I do. Just think about that for a moment, and then put your social media schedule and strategy, base it on that.
Okay, we have a question in the front here.
Thank you for all the comments, it was very useful. I'm doing my PhD, but I love science communication, and so far I'm trying to participate wherever I can to share my research. But what I experienced is a lot of underestimation from some colleagues. So I think that some scientists still don't really understand the importance of it, and they always tell me, oh, you have too much time, or I don't know, I heard a lot of comments, and it's a lot of work, and it's constant improvement. So I don't know if you have any suggestions or arguments or ideas how this could be improved.
No, keep at it, and then when you get invited to conferences and your boss doesn't, best feeling in the world.
I just would add that there's definitely a cultural aspect. Certain cultures are more like gifted and inclined to be able to promote themselves, and other cultures, it's frowned upon more. So I think you have to kind of check in with who's your audience. So when I was in the States, like it was just, that was more part of the culture, but in Australia, it's not so much, I think.
And I guess it's changing. I don't know. I recognize what you're saying. I had the same problem during my PhD where my supervisor came and said, like, you're spending too much time on these outreach activities. But then when it came to getting prizes for outreach and things like that, the lab was doing really well because I was doing all these outreach activities and the lab was getting credit and I wasn't. So it was really frustrating, but just keep at it.
It'll pay off in the long run. And then just rub it in his face, whoever that is. It might not be your advisor, it might be somebody in the department, but man, it's gonna feel great, I promise you.
Just tag him in every post, him or her, like.
Oh, we can all gang up on him too. We can shit on his science and we can get nasty if you want.
Yeah, sure.
And thank you for the nice discussion. It's really funny. Something I just wanted to talk about is that sometimes there are some dark sides of this whole social media things. For example, I myself, I made a really bad mistake once, and I posted things that actually they were really general. Like, I don't know, like some other people published some articles, some were maybe in Science even, or I don't know, like top journals, like articles, and then I shared it, and it was really bad because people, let's look at it in a professional way. If you're working in a company or wherever you're working, every single tweet or every single post that you make in social media counts, and you can't do it without even knowing it, not on purpose, but you can post something that can really affect your, I don't know, job perspective and then lead to, I don't know, complication. So
apparently you can become president with bad tweets, so anyway, good.
It's just that
You fail up, yeah.
It's kind of like, I don't know, I myself, I'm super hyperactive and proactive on social media, but I also got to this point that I had this experience that it really was dangerous. Put me in danger. I was about to lose, let's say, not job, whatever. But I mean, we should also be very careful about it. When we are advertising, being active on social media, we should also talk about these dark sides, like take care of what you're posting.
Yeah, I mean, that's great advice.
My mom's advice for social media was don't post anything you don't want me to see. This was more about Facebook and like drunk pictures and stuff, but maybe it counts for this as well a little bit.
Yeah, also learn how to apologize, I think. And I mean that sincerely, actually. There's like a way to apologize that's kind of like, or...
Sorry if you felt offended by...
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry you're hurt. Like, but like, you know, recognize what you did wrong and say why it happened and then say how it's not going to happen again. And maybe, I think that people will respect you more for it. I did academia because I did not want to deal with the business world, and then I left academia because I didn't want to deal with that. So I don't know how, I know that there's sensitive people out there and it's dangerous. So go into comedy, man. You can do whatever. I work 2 hours a week. It's great.
Do you survive, though, off their comedy?
No, I don't have toilet paper, but like, you know, it's trade-offs, yeah?
Okay.
All right, just a comment on your incident. I think it's very good for us to use privacy settings. So you can set whatever you post to your friends, opposed to be public post for everyone to see. If you want to post your opinions or something personal, just determine the audience.
On Twitter, you can do it.
Yeah,
if
but
you block someone, that someone can see you.
yeah, Twitter is not. Yeah, don't post about your breakup on Twitter. No.
You can try to always try to get in the habit of delaying your tweets, so scheduling them instead of automatically. If you're an impulsive person, like like I am, there was once where I was like, "Oh, this is a great photo." No, and like because I had that day period, leeway time, it helped. So there's little practical things you can think about. But if anybody else in the audience had dark sides of SciComm and social media to just serve as a warning. Or if anybody's pissed off about the whole conversation right now, feel free to, get into it, man. We've been in here for like over an hour now.
Yes.
Just throw it on Twitter.
Sorry.
No, it just said just throw it on Twitter if you don't like it.
Yeah.
Yes, tweet at us. And
Matt Murtha,
say,
such a
this was an
jerk.
awful session. Anyway, I think we have time for one more question. Is there anyone who's brave enough? My list of questions have all been asked. This is annoying. Kind of. Oh.
No, don't.
So we talked a lot about like social media and those type of things, but it was briefly mentioned YouTube and podcasts, which are more, I guess, podcasting is really big. And I know, Matt, you want to get into podcasting. Do you have any?
I have a podcast, thank you.
Sorry.
No, actually, it's a radio program. You can tune in on BarcelonaCityFM.com.
So are there any things you need to take into account when you're doing verbal communication that people can't see what you're doing?
Yeah, actually, so with podcasting, I think a lot of times people overestimate their ability to be interesting. And I would strongly recommend you plan out the topics that you're going to cover and the order, and like allow there to be a little bit of structure and things to bail out into, so you're not just saying And it's the same way with like when it's all the verbal tips that you have for presenting, like not saying try to keep those in the back of your head as well. But personally, podcasting, man, it's my opinion that you need to have a brand and you need to be kind of well known first, because all the people that you listen to on podcasts are generally, they were either first adopters or they're already famous. So don't do it. Or try it. I don't know. Try it. If that's what you like, man, keep doing it. And then comment on other podcasts and, get involved. Everything seems to be very community oriented. Like it really everything seems to be driven by interactions and getting people excited in a very human sense. And I think that's probably why people grow faster than brands.
Yeah, I also think for YouTube and podcasts, because the markets are so oversaturated there, that it only works if you have a great niche. For example, a unique new view on the whole thing, because I started vlogging on YouTube and it was impossible. I could get some followers through my already Twitter profile, which was back then I think at 5,000 followers. So I managed to get some leverage there, but the amount of time most accounts that I knew from the network of science YouTubers that I knew personally, they were in it for 8 years before they even got a bit big. I guess it's maybe the same already for podcast. Yeah. So it's really difficult. If you have a niche, then you might be able to break through. But for example, I used my YouTube knowledge and Instagram, because for Instagram, edited stories of 15 seconds, that was something new. And people were really like, how do you edit these stories? Why are your stories so different than other people? And I saw my following go up like that, because it was a new niche for Instagram at that time.
But I think I was going to say that, in defense of anybody that wants to start and feels discouraged by the fact that it's very hard to get noticed, just by like following your passion and doing it, you're going to learn a set of skills that will perhaps be transferable to something that's not oversaturated.
Okay, I would like to ask the panelists to summarize maybe a take-home message. What do you want everyone here to leave with as a final thought? Who wants to go first?
I'll go first. I'm used to talking. You guys the sooner I stop talking, the happier everybody will be. So use branding as an opportunity to identify who you are and who you want to be, and then try to allow that to guide your public persona. Be consistent.
I would say your brand, you got to be able to back up your brand. That's all. Like, if you can, that's great. And you can be a little bit aspirational. Like, you might not be completely there yet, so you can brand yourself if you're like on the way. But I don't know if these guys agree with me, but I would say it has to pass the test of being able to speak in front of experts and answer questions.
I think my take-home message for today would be to continue a bit of the question that was asked there, or maybe the comment about the negative side of social media. I think you also never have to underestimate what positive things that you can do once you gain a following. For example, breaking stereotype of gender roles, certain ethnicities and stuff like that. You can really push forward a whole field and a whole culture by simply putting yourself out there. So it takes a lot of effort, time and things, but you can do really, really great things with it. I mean, the community that we have on Instagram of scientists, they're really amazing, supportive people, and we've been able to do so much to go against like certain cultures that live within academia. So I think to end on a positive note, the power of social media.
The power, yes. And to end with a quote, apparently Gandhi said at some point, be the brand you want to see in the world. Let's see if I can do that from here. Yes, so I would like to thank you all for attending this session. We are all on Twitter, so if you're, or other social media or whatever, how you want to reach us. If you have any other thoughts, comments, doubts, want to break into SciComm, not sure how, please reach out or come and talk to me at the social event later on that I'm shamelessly pitching again. Thanks.
Yay.